So the ceasefire has started, stopped, and extended. And I've been sitting with it all morning. And I think the reason it's bothering so many people isn't actually like the war itself. I think the reason is that there's this feeling that comes around every 15 or 20 years in America where everything all of a sudden just feels fragile. And you read the news and you think, wait, is this real? Is this how it starts? And I've been thinking about that feeling for a few days now because it's not a new feeling. Every generation of Americans has had one. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1973, 79, 9/11, and 2008, every one of those for people living through it felt exactly like this. And I figured instead of doing the video everyone's doing this week, which is, what's oil going to do? What's the Fed going to do? What's Iran going to do? I wanted to go back and actually look at what happened after each of those moments. Not the news version, but the money version. What happened to the value of what you owned? What happened to what you earned and happened to the country on the other side of it? Because I think there's a pattern there. And once you see it, I don't think you can then unsee it. I want to start again and say we have created for your benefit a PDF that you can get to via the description in the video. In that PDF, we cover all of the dates, all the different things we're talking about. So you don't need to write anything down or take notes. It's very professionally done, and I think you'll really like it. Make sure you get that before you go on. If this is your first time here, welcome to the channel. We'd love to have you stick around, so go ahead and hit subscribe. And as always, nothing we cover here is financial advice. Do your own research and consult a professional before making any investment decisions. I want to go through the 5 biggest "is this real" moments in modern American history, 1 through 5 in order, and I want to tell you 3 things about each one. So let me walk you through them. 1, the Cuban Missile Crisis. So for 13 days in October of 1962, the United States and the Soviet Union were, by the best estimates of the people in the room, somewhere between 15 and 40% likely to start an actual nuclear war. That's not a number I'm making up. That's Kennedy's own estimate to his brother in the room. Here's what people felt. They felt like they were going to die. Kids were going to duck and cover drills. Grocery stores were running out of canned food. Half the country left their city for the weekend because they thought New York and Washington were going to get hit. Here's what actually happened. On October 28th, Khrushchev blinked. The Soviets agreed to pull the missiles out of Cuba. And then Kennedy agreed, and quietly to pull the American missiles out of Turkey a few months later. The story was over. Kennedy gave a speech. The country exhaled. Now, here's the part that no one remembers. 9 years later, the dollar left the gold standard. And it wasn't a direct cause. I'm not saying the Cuban Missile Crisis caused Nixon to close the gold window in 1971. What I'm saying is the thing that made 1971 possible started in the early 60s with a massive increase in U.S. military spending that was born out of Cold War panic. The United States did not actually have enough gold to back the dollars it had printed to pay for all of this. France figured it out first. In 1965, Charles de Gaulle ordered French warships to the port of New York to physically pick up France's gold. They didn't just trust these paper claims anymore. They wanted the actual metal. The other countries started doing the exact same thing. And by 1971, so much gold was flowing out of the U.S. that Nixon basically said, that's it, we're done. The dollar is no longer backed by gold. Announced it on a Sunday night in August. the most important monetary event of the last 100 years. And the people watching the announcement had no idea what it meant. If you were an American in 1962 and someone had told you, hey, the real consequences of these 13 days isn't going to be a war, it's going to be that your currency stops being money in the way you understand 9 years from now, you would have thought they were literally like insane. But that's exactly what happened. Let's move to number 2, the oil embargo. In October of 1973, another Arab-Israeli war breaks out. The United States sides with Israel. OPEC responds by cutting off oil to America. Gas prices quadruple in just 4 months. You know those pictures of cars all lined up for blocks at gas stations? That's October of 1973. Here's what actually happened. The embargo ended in March of 1974. Oil came back. The gas lines disappeared. People went back to normal. People exhaled, but they shouldn't have. While everyone was watching the gas lines, something much bigger was happening underneath. The price of oil went from around $3 a barrel to nearly $12. And that cost just didn't hit the gas prices, it hit the cost of everything made with oil. And the Fed, trying to fight the resulting inflation, raised interest rates. And it did not work. Inflation went above 9%. Unemployment went to 9%. And the country entered a decade of something economists didn't really have a word for before 1973. They called it stagflation. High inflation, high unemployment, and no growth. Now, here's the part that matters. If you had $100,000 in savings in 1973, by 1982, that money had lost more than half of its purchasing power. Not because everybody stole it, because the price of everything you wanted to buy had doubled while your money sat there in the bank. That's what inflation actually does. It's the quietest form of theft there is, and most of the country never saw it coming. The people who did fine, though, were the ones that decided and owned real things. These were like houses and commodities like gold and silver, which was legal for Americans to own, again, starting in 1975. And which went from around $35 an ounce in 1971 to over $800 an ounce by 1980. That's a 23 times move in 9 years. The gas lines were never the story. The gas lines were the distraction. The story was the decade of silent erosion that followed. Now let's move to number 3, November 1979. And pertinent today, the Iran hostage crisis. Iranian revolutionaries stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and take 52 American hostages. They held them for 444 days. It dominated the news every single night for over a year. ABC launched a TV show, Nightline, just to cover it. The country felt weak, stuck. Here's what actually happened, though. The hostages came home. They were released on January 20th, 1981, the exact moment Ronald Reagan was being sworn in. Carter was now gone. New president, fresh start, country exhaled. But again, underneath, the Iranian Revolution had taken about 5 million barrels of oil per day off of the global market. Oil prices doubled again, from around $14 to $35, and inflation ratcheted up to 13.5% in 1980. Paul Volcker was the Fed chair, and he made a decision that he was going to crush inflation at any cost, even if it meant causing a brutal recession, which it did. Unemployment hit almost 11% in 1982. The farmer crisis of the 1980s, when tens of thousands of American family farms were foreclosed on, that happened because of the 20% interest rates. The savings and loan crisis later that decade cost taxpayers $160 billion to clean it up. That was downstream of the 1979 oil shock too. The hostages were the story everyone watched. The real story was that a generation of American wealth got reorganized in the response to that moment. And most of the people who lived through it have no idea that the thing they remember, the yellow ribbons, the nightline countdown, had almost nothing to do with what actually changed in their country. Now, let's move to number 4. This is a big one. September 11th, 2001. If you were alive, you remember exactly where you were. A lot of people don't know, but I actually worked in Two World Trade the year before the bombing took place. So that was a very, very personal event for me, and I had many friends in those buildings. I want to talk now about what other people and the general public basically felt. They felt like the world had changed in a very single moment. That something that they had taken for granted for, say, their whole lives, the basic safety of being an American city on a Tuesday was now gone. Here's, though, what actually happened. Almost 3,000 people died. The country then went to war, actually 2 wars, Afghanistan and Iraq. The war in Afghanistan lasted 20 years, but here again, underneath, the combined cost of post 9/11 wars by the Cost of Wars project at Brown University was somewhere around $8 trillion. $8 trillion with a T, borrowed, all of it. Not a penny of it was paid for by raising taxes at the time. And you can draw a pretty straight line from that borrowing to the fact that the United States today has close to $40 trillion in national debt. And they normalized a thing that hadn't been normalized before, which is that a country could just borrow whatever it wanted for as long as it wanted and for basically any reason and not have to even think about it. The airport security, the surveillance state, the civil liberties debate, all real, all very important. But the quiet story of 9/11, the one that's still shaping your life now 25 years later, is that it was the moment America decided debt kind of like didn't matter. And everything that happened to interest rates, to inflation, to housing prices, to the cost of college, to the fact that your grocery bill is what it is, all of that traces back to that very decision. And now let's talk about number 5, and that would be September 2008, the financial crisis. Lehman Brothers goes bankrupt on a Monday morning. Within a week, the entire American financial system is on the edge of total collapse. Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson gets on a knee in front of Nancy Pelosi and begs her to pass a bailout bill. That's not a figure of speech. He actually physically got on his knee. Here's what people felt. They felt like the money in their bank account might not be there even tomorrow. People were withdrawing cash. Every major financial institution in the country was quietly insolvent at the same exact time. The country lost 800,000 jobs a month at the peak, and household wealth dropped 17% in a single year. But here's what actually happened. Congress passed TARP, $700 billion to bail out the banks. The Fed, under Ben Bernanke, invented something called quantitative easing, basically creating new money out of nothing to buy up toxic assets from these banks. The Fed's balance sheet, which is basically a measure of how much money the central bank has created, was under $1 trillion before this crisis. Today, it's over $7 trillion, peaked at 9. That's how much new money got created in response to 2008. And where did that money go? It didn't go to you. It didn't go into your paycheck. It went into the asset markets, the price of stocks, the price of houses, the price of everything that rich people had already owned. All of those went up, and a lot. From 2009 to 2021, the S&P 500 went up over 600%. Home prices in a lot of American cities doubled or tripled. The people who owned those things got a lot richer, and the people who didn't, which was of course most of America, got priced out. Lehman wasn't the story. The story was the 12-year monetary response that followed, and the way it quietly sorted the country into people who owned assets and people who did not. Now for the through line. So, 5 moments, 5 times in the last 65 years where the entire country had the same feeling you had this morning when you read about the ceasefire or the stopped ceasefire or the extended ceasefire. And if you squint, the pattern is completely obvious. In every single one of those, the thing that felt like the story was not the thing that ended up being the story. The geopolitical event was the actual trigger. The money response was the consequence. And the money response is what changed regular people's lives for the next 10 to 20 years. So, not the event, which now brings me to this morning. The ceasefire is probably the least interesting thing to think about this week. What I can tell you is the pattern from the last 5 times is really clear. The event is not going to be what matters. What matters is what the government does about it. And what the government does about it historically has always been the same thing. They reach for the tool they have, and the tool they have is money. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you what to do with your money. That's not my job. What I'll tell you is what I've been doing personally. I've been doing this a long time. And the thing I've taken from studying the 5 moments I just walked through is that people who came out the other side of each of them in reasonable shape tended to be the people who owned some amount of something the government could not print more of. In the 70s, it was gold. In the 80s, for different reason, it was stocks and real estate. Post 2008, it was the same. Anyone who owned anything real did just fine. People who got hurt were the people who held mostly cash. For me personally, at this moment, that means I'm holding a little more physical gold than I used to. Not a lot, not all in, not timing a trade, just enough that if the pattern from the last 5 times repeats, and doesn't it always, I have insurance. But I want to be really clear. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm telling you what I'm doing. And those are different things. The bigger thing I want you to take from this is just when you watch the news tonight and they show you the headline, ask yourself what's happening underneath the headline. Because the pattern from the last 65 years is that underneath is where your life actually gets decided. And the headline is usually a distraction. So that's what I've got. I'd love to hear what you think specifically. Which of the 5 moments that I walked through do you think is the closest parallel to now? Is it 62, 73, 79, 01, or 08? I have my answer, but I'm curious what you see. Leave it in the comments below. Now remember, we have a PDF. It's the first link in the description. Download it. It's got a lot of details we're talking about today. So stay sharp. Think about holding those real assets, gold, real estate, things that the government can't get a hold of. It's really important right now. I'm Eric with Summit Metals, and happy stacking.